Good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:04. Thank you all for attending this special meeting. Let's get right to our old business. We've got two sets of minutes. The first one is from June 28th.
So moved.
Move for approval by Bob Ike. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Patrick. Any discussion, comments? All in favor of approving the minutes from June 28th, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, the motion passes. Then we have minutes from July 12th. We have a motion to
moved.
approve by Mr. Ike, seconded by
Second,
Lois. Thank you very much. Comments, corrections on the July 12th? Let me get my list of hands up here, excuse me. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, it's not that. There we go. Okay. I don't see any hands. All in favor of approving the minutes from July 12th, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. All right, thank you. All right, so to remind everybody where we're at, we had a presentation last week by Downs on some initial reactions to our being over budget, some options. I believe our goal tonight is to come up with what we want to recommend to the town council at their meeting this coming Monday. So since last week, we have learned a few things. We had a lot of questions last week. And a few things have been answered. I think basically almost everything that we needed to know has been answered. Number one, we heard from our bond attorney with the help of our town attorney, Mark Needleman, and thanks to Mark for all his involvement in this. But our bond attorney has clarified that the referendum language does in fact allows the town council quite a bit of flexibility. If we want to do one project only, we can still do that under the language, pursue the other project in some other fashion. So there's a lot of options there. Any options that we've been looking at are okay in terms of the referendum language. The bond attorney also clarified that the use of these funds for operating expenses for temporary facilities is allowed. So in other words, we've already got some money in this latest budget to keep the unoccupied libraries safe. And so we can do that with project money. That's the first item from the bond attorney. Next, the financial advisor for the town reported to the town council finance committee this week and gave an overview, a very thorough overview of our bonding capacity in town, given the picture of what current debt we have, how that is declining, and ran I think it was four different scenarios of additional bonding, of 10 million, 11 million, 12 million, 14 million, 15 million. That's 5 different scenarios. All of them, none of them exceeded our bonding capacity, our debt capacity, which is basically 10% of our operating expenses any given year. In fact, the question was raised, would that bring us below an 8%, a more conservative approach, which the town would prefer? And the financial advisor said, yes, it would. So we have no impedance to in terms of our capacity to bond this additional funding if we're going to go ahead and do that. If town council is going to go ahead and do that. Obviously, there are other factors, but the debt capacity is not a limiting factor. And going back to the bond attorney, also with the help of our town attorney, we did get a detailed schedule, and Nancy was involved in this as well, a detailed schedule so that we can make a November referendum for this additional funding, again, with town council's approval and assistance. And we can go into some of that in more detail later. It would take an initial action by town council on Monday to set it in motion. No further details necessary from town council, just set it in motion, and then other details will follow after that, similarly to other projects in town. So our goal again is to end up with some recommendations that this committee would like to make to the town council on Monday to hopefully get that in motion. So I'm gonna turn it over to our construction manager team. I see Tom and Anthony. And I'll turn it over to you guys to update us on where we stand.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone. So I think we're gonna take a step back and just kind of go through the different scenarios one more time, just to refresh everybody on the different scenarios. And then within each one of those scenarios are a couple of different options. And what I want to focus on when we talk about these different scenarios is the timeline. And then I want to focus on one particular component of it as it relates to the financial impact. And the reason I say that is because I think based on the last meeting, I think we're pretty comfortable that approaching this process in every one of the scenarios, that the value that we have in there for value engineering or value management to achieve a $1 million savings is comfortable and conservative to include. And I think it's appropriate that we look at those particular options within those scenarios a little bit harder. But if Anthony can share the screen, I'm going to go through the different options, the different scenarios, and we actually added one option to that, as Mark mentioned, the additional information that we now have that the November referendum is now in play. So Anthony, just go to the left and let's just work our way from left to right, just to refresh everybody. Scenario one is to seek additional funding. And if we had an extended period of time for the additional funding and pursuing the referendum past the November referendum election, that would put us starting both projects in May. And that would have an additional 9 months of swing space with a move-in and an occupancy for Prosser in December of 25, McMahon in June of 25. And that also has an impact on the operating budgets to maintain both buildings for upwards of 10 months. Now, if you scroll over to the left, Anthony, to what we're calling scenario 1C, keep going right to the line there. Yep. So there, we actually pulled back the referendum and the pursuit of additional funding by 2 months, essentially seeking that November election as the referendum milestone, which ultimately reduces some of the escalation because now 2 months of construction time comes back to us. Every option in this scenario requires a rebid because we will exceed the period to hold bids. So that means we lose the current low bidders on the packages. Any value engineering, value management that would be done, we could ultimately fold into the documents when we go out for rebid. That brings everything back 2 months. So occupancy, I'm sorry, let me start with the start of the project. So from May, we bring that back to March for both projects. Occupancy, we roll that back from December to October, and then June to April. And it also reduces the extension of the swing space from 9 months to 7 months. And as you can see, that is an additional funding request. Just circle that or highlight that 12 million in yellow there, Anthony. 12,869,632, as opposed to scenario 1B. Just scroll over real quick. Yep, good job with the cloud. So if we held for 2 more months and we didn't make that November referendum, the additional escalation would be estimated at $13,302,412. Perfect. Thanks, Anthony. So let's go down to scenario 2. Now is where we start to stagger the starts of each project. And we also added the option to pull back the 2 months for the additional funding. So scenarios 2 and 2B would be to start Prosser, which the sooner we can solidify that, we can anticipate a start at some point in September, which would mean we would be rebidding McMahon. Again, any value engineering, value management that we would be able to fold into those documents. We lose a little bit of the economic savings there with running the projects a little bit more concurrently than we had anticipated. Some of the trades would not be concurrent in this particular scenario, and we've built that cost into it as well. So that would be an occupancy in April of 25 for Prosser and June of 25 for McMahon, and the swing space extension would be 7 months. And similar to the prior option of just rolling everything back 2 months, that does not affect the start of Prosser. That doesn't affect the start of Prosser at all, because we would essentially be able to start it. But what it does do is it lines up both jobs almost perfectly, in this, this high level scenario, where they would both be essentially finishing at the same time. And we would be able to pull back the start of McMahon back to March, again, still rebidding, and we would reduce the swing space time by 2 months, so 7 months instead of 9. And the request for additional funding would be $10,324,975. If you could just highlight that one, Anthony, and then just jump back to the left. Actually, you can almost see it on the screen there. Holding for another 2 months, $10,430,728. And that does have the operating costs for McMahon included as well. But it does get one of the projects started as soon as possible. And then we jump down to scenario C, which is broken down exactly the same, except we flip-flop the start of McMahon, which we could start in September, but we would push Prosser out. If we're seeking additional funding that extends to February, that would be to a start of May. But it does allow you to occupy McMahon sooner in October of 24, reduces any extension of swing space by 1 month, but does have the cost of keeping Prosser operational while vacant for a significant amount of time. Prosser would essentially be complete in December of 25. And then if you scroll to the left, Anthony, for the third option, again, every one of these options include a value management exercise of $1 million. This would pull back Prosser 2 months to start back to March. Still keeps the swing space, still keeps McMahon where it was, reduces a little bit of the cost for the vacant, keeping Prosser running while vacant, and pulls the occupancy back to October of 25. The additional funding required for these two options is $12,357,522 versus just a little bit to the left, Anthony, please. $12,650,949. So that's kind of the recap of these scenarios. Our pursuit here is to minimize the escalation impact, the operating expense exposure. We're looking to discuss these options, and I think we're from our perspective, and certainly TSKP can comment as well. I think we're comfortable with the $1 million reduction in cost without affecting the program for each of the two libraries.
Okay, I'm going to open up to questions in a second, but in thinking about this, I want to break it down a little bit. Hopefully it'll make it easier as we go forward. I would like to be in a position on Monday night to recommend to town council that they pursue a November referendum. Can we look at that and that alone first for discussion?
Anthony, you want to just bring that screen back up and just keep it right on those three November options, please?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, if we're going to be pursuing additional funds, then sooner is better than later. In all cases, no matter how we proceed.
So let me clarify, Mark, are you asking for the building committee to just bifurcate this and not pick a scenario right now? Just get some consensus on whether or not we want to ask for an additional referendum? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to discuss and even vote on. A recommendation first to town council that they pursue a November referendum for additional funding.
Mark, are you looking for a motion on the floor?
I would be very happy to take that.
I'd like to make a motion that the Library Building Committee recommend to the town council that we pursue a November 7th, 2023 referendum in conjunction with the municipal election.
Do we have a
Second.
second on that?
I'll second.
Liz Waterhouse. Hi, Liz. Thank you. Okay, so discussion, please, on that. Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, I certainly agree with this motion that's been made by Mr. Ike to get this moving as soon as possible. My question though first is, if we didn't make a November referendum, what is the next possibility for having a referendum after that?
Well, my understanding is there's no specific structure in place.
Okay,
It would be at the discretion of the town council.
okay.
And Phil Shank, our town manager, is here with us. Maybe Phil, would you want to respond to that? What the possibilities would be if we don't have a November referendum?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Can everybody hear me or?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. I'm operating off of a cell phone and I've never, well, I shouldn't say I've never done it, but it's, these things are always a challenge. In any case, there's no set particular event time for a second or an optional referendum. Normally what happens, most town councils don't like to have a referendum during school vacations. They don't like to have one during holiday seasons. So I would anticipate that more than likely, if we don't hold one in November, you're probably looking after the holidays. A complicating factor to that from an educational standpoint is that it would be after the election. We don't know how many new council members might be elected and would have to be brought up to speed on the project, various scenarios and options that are available. So got an educational potential lag in there in terms of having a referendum after, say, the holidays in January, February, or March, or so forth. So if we can make the November 7th date, that would be assuming that's the direction the building committee wants to go in, I would say that we should try to make the November 7th date, if at all possible. Otherwise, you're faced with further delays in the project and probably in getting a referendum set up.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate that. And that's all the more reason why I do think we should recommend the November 2023 referendum on the same day as the municipal election. And if we didn't, it's just going to, like you said, it's going to push, we're going to almost be decided upon already that we're going to have to go with the first scenario, which posed the most risk in waiting for that additional funding. So they think the longer we delay, the more the costs are going to build. And I do think that this is the right direction to go.
I think, Mark, also the question may come up, well, why can't we hook a referendum onto some of the potential primary activities for the presidential election in the fall of 2024? And those can't really be done because they're specific political party primaries and so forth. So those are not allowed during that or in conjunction with the outside referendum. So.
Thank you, Phil. Patrick, you good?
Yes. Yeah, that really answered my question. And
Lois. You're muted.
I also support going ahead with the referendum as soon as possible. Also because it adds expense. A separate referendum will be expensive. It will mean setting up the town for election separate from a normal one. So I think we should move ahead quickly if we have determined that we needed additional funding, and that doesn't seem even to be in question any longer.
Thanks, Lois. Other hands? Okay, if not, then let's take a vote. Nancy, would you do a roll call for us?
Sure. Patrick,
aye.
Lois,
Aye.
Marcia Bryant, Marcia, I don't know if you're having problems. You can raise your virtual hand if you're okay with that.
Where is it? I see her on the list.
I know. All right, we'll come back to Marcia. Liz? Aye. Bob Ike
Aye.
and Mark Weissman.
Chair votes aye. Are we going to hear from Dr. Bryant here? Something's going on with.
Yeah. Were you able to connect, Dr. Bryant?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm voting no.
Okay.
That's everyone. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to put another idea on the table here for discussion and motion. And that is the idea of proceeding with one of the projects immediately. Not saying which one. I'm just saying that rather than hold back on both projects, that we proceed with one of them. And I want to open that up for discussion.
Are you looking for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Mr. Wright, go ahead.
I make a motion that we proceed with construction of the Prosser Library, but incumbent that we immediately reopen McMahon, immediately with all deliberate speed.
You're saying make it operational? Is that your intent here, McMahon, while we're
Yes, sir. I don't know if that's acceptable.
okay, it's not an option on the table, but you're free to make the motion. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay, thanks, Lois. All right, so let's open that up to discussion. Ava.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I really don't think that moving back to McMahon is a viable option. Aside from the expense of incurring another move and disrupting service again and the effect on staff. For some reason, there seems to be an assumption that McMahon is in good condition. That is not the case. There are foundation issues and other issues that argue against doing this. We have a nice temporary space. There are various ways to get there. Senior Services is looking at making minibus transportation available on top of the bus lines, on top of personal transportation. So I really think that's not a great option for a number of reasons. Thank you.
Thanks, Ava. Other hands, other comments on the motion?
Hi, Mark.
Nancy?
Oh.
Yeah.
Nancy had her hand up, and then Maxine, we'll get you next.
Okay.
Thanks. I did want to remind people, in case they don't know, that there is no operating budget for McMahon in the town's budget. And while we got the go-ahead from bond council to utilize bond proceed funds for the maintaining the bare minimum of the unoccupied building, I don't believe that that would extend to an occupied building. So that would mean that the cost would have to be borne by the town, and it's not budgeted.
Thanks, Nancy. Maxine?
Hi, I just wanted to go on record, just expressing my concern at the direction that we're going in. And I think that if we have an open discussion about whether or not we move forward with one project and with the hope of moving or finishing the second project, I think we have to be explicit in what we're talking about. Otherwise, I think we're still juggling apples, because some people will want McMahon, some people will want Prosser. So I think it needs to be an open discussion. I don't necessarily agree with moving forward with Prosser first. I do think both libraries have concerns. I think we have to weigh the pros and cons and make sure that those are clear as we make decisions, so that our decisions can be informed. But I do think once we do that, we have to have a clear plan of how we're going to move forward, so that we have two libraries at the end of all of this, because that's what we promised our citizens.
Maxine, do you have some specific questions about, that's exactly what we're trying to do here tonight. Is
Right,
lay
but
all of these facts and figures and
I get that,
pluses
but
and minuses.
But the way it was presented is to determine, to determine if we move forward with one move forward with one library and then perhaps the second. What I'm asking is, why are we not determining which library and putting all of those factors on the table so that we can make an informed decision? I feel like if we talk about, do we go forward with one and not know which one, that it's not clear to me, at least for me.
Well, right now we have a motion on the floor to move forward with Prosser immediately.
Right. And I said that I don't necessarily agree with that. Again, we would have to see all the facts, and I don't agree with moving back to McMahon. What burden, financial burden, is that going to put on the town? How does that impact the library itself, the staffing, the reshelving? All of those things are concerning.
Okay, any specific facts you're looking for about Prosser when you say?
I
you're
think
not
that we
sure
need to
about-
have a pros and cons list, because I think we have so many factors that it's hard to make a determination without seeing a generated list of some sort. And maybe that can come from Elizabeth and her team, as well as, maybe you guys can collaborate on it and come up with what all the factors are. I think I've heard several factors, and I just have so much floating in my head that it's unclear of all the impacts of the factors that are presented. What's the impact to the town? What's the impact to the residents? What's the impact to the library staff? What's the impact to the timeline?
Okay, well, I hope we have all of that in front of us tonight, honestly, because we're looking at timelines, we're looking at costs, we're looking at risk factors, so I feel like we have all of that here available to us. I hope we're not going to prolong this beyond tonight, because I think we've, with our consultants here, we've developed answers to all of those things. And so that's why I want to, generate exactly what you're asking for here. Discussion on the pros and cons of this. More hands. Elizabeth.
I have a question about the bid process. If we did make a recommendation to go forward with one building, is it something we could do where we could see if the leftover money was enough? Could you go out to bid again? Kind of just trying to see if those numbers come down at all, or is it like you bid and you're stuck with that bid if we were to go out again for one or the other projects? I guess I'm curious about that, just because the 9 million was so much over. And is there any hope that if we were to pick one and go back to the drawing board with the bid process for it again, that it would be much lower? Like, would we have to wait through to make sure we had enough money on the table, if that makes sense? Does my question make sense?
Yeah,
Well,
I can partially answer that, Mark, if you want me to chime in.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think the bids that we have, if we're going to proceed with one project, I think we got competitive bids, and without making very significant scope changes, I think it is in the best interest of everyone to accept the bids for the project that we're anticipating, whichever one it is, to start. Because if that goes out to rebid, the market now knows what the costs are. It's a public bid, everybody sees the numbers. So without a significant change, you're potentially at a higher risk of not getting that same number, of the number actually going up, right? So kind of a bird in the hand right now. We have a competitive number. The market has told us what the escalation is projected to be for the original schedule that we put out to bid. So we have that information now, and that's the best information that we have to make this educated decision. So I would not recommend rebidding if we're projecting to start one of these projects.
So in other words, Elizabeth, I think the scenario you're talking about would require a significant redesign of
I
at least
see.
one of the projects to
Okay.
to lower the cost enough to open it up to whatever monies are left or just some other amount. And I think we've dismissed that as an option, you know, a significant redesign at this point,
Right.
you know, to chop these projects down. You know, after all, we've gone through to develop where they're at this point. So I hope does that answer your question?
Yes, so for instance, if we went with Prosser first and then McMahon, there would be the chance that McMahon could come back even higher after bidding, based off of these projections. And there's really no chance that it could come in lower.
Well, a combination of things. There's a time factor in there. Whatever gets bid second in this process would have the disadvantage of some escalation costs because of extended time. So there's an opportunity for prices to go up now, but the budgets that Downs has drafted for us take that into account.
Right.
The other thing is, though, they are working with TSKP on some conservative measure of reducing costs. Okay, but you know, some changing some minimal things in design doesn't affect program or size to reduce costs. So there's that side of it as well. And then there's that factor Tom just brought up. The numbers are on the street. People know how other people have already bid. That does not always bode well for a rebid to lower prices. So all of those factors come into play. But hopefully, you know, the number that we would eventually recommend for this referendum would cover the time factor and the escalation of our current design with some minimal value reductions. Did I do that all right, Tom? Is that
Yeah, perfect. And that's why proceeding with Prosser, you get a better financial impact because we're solidifying a larger number of the bids because it's a larger project.
Patrick?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. If we're just looking at these three scenarios that are on the screen right now, and we make the assumption that town council does accept our recommendation for a November 2023 referendum, when I look at these, to me, the project or the scenario that best fits our needs at this time, I would want to recommend the middle ones, scenario 2D, which would be to start Prosser in 2023 September and to pursue the referendum and do the value engineering and then proceed with McMahon once we know what we're getting. I do believe that there are many pros to, and I like that idea about the pros and the cons that Maxine mentioned earlier. So I think we could start to list them out, but at least in this option, the pros I see right away is the additional funding need. We're talking 10,324,000 versus 12 and 12 in the other scenarios. So that to me right there is a bonus. And especially for the referendum purposes to our citizens, we're asking for a lesser amount in order to do this work, to get 2 libraries built. The other thing about this is the Prosser construction can start right away. McMahon gets pulled back, as Tom talked about earlier, by 2 months, and both libraries would be able to open at the same time. I think that's a huge benefit. And then our swing space is also reduced down to 7 months, as opposed to a lot longer term in the other scenarios. The only other one on this page that reduces that further is the third one, but it's 1 month. So we're now talking 6 months more in this scenario. The con to this, of course, is the reverse, is that we're starting with Prosser and not McMahon. But we are saying that 2 libraries will be built, and this gives the benefit of not delaying any work, not getting our costs higher than what they could be, And, it could present a very good case to go with this scenario. So if the maker of the motion earlier, I think Bob Ike, was willing to amend that motion to take out the part about moving back into McMahon and just moving forward with scenario 2D, I would make that request to amend the motion and then open it for further discussion.
So amended, Patrick, so amended.
And I'll
All right.
second that too.
Thank you. All right, so we're discussing a motion to proceed immediately with Prosser.
Mhm.
And then after we obtain additional funding, rebid McMahon and proceed with that. That's that middle scenarios. More discussion on this motion. I know it's a very sensitive issue, which library to start with, which library is more important. It's really almost impossible to, to objectively say which one is more important. That's why this building committee, which I will remind everybody, is the Prosser Library Building Committee. That's how we started out. Our charge was to do Prosser, and this body decided that both libraries are important, and we've been pursuing two the entire time. So we really imposed that, on ourselves, and that's what formulated the referendum. That's what we've been working on the whole time. But I was reminded of that when I went back and looked through all our documents during the week. That is our decision, that we want to pursue both buildings. But somehow, the lower price tag, the shorter time period is very appealing, I think, in this option. Our construction manager has said to us, it's of all the scenarios, it's the lowest risk in terms of cost escalation, possible cost escalation, and future expenses. So thank you, Mr. Ike, for amending that. Nancy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I would like to add my 2 cents worth for some additional pros to going with this option. If I recall correctly, our doing 2D first would help us avoid some winter operations. I believe Downs told us last time. So I think that is obviously a advantage as well. I believe that 2D was essentially what was recommended by our paid professionals last time. Both Downs and Colliers supported that. I was at the Finance Committee meeting the other night, and because this would be the lowest cost of all the options, that would leave room in the town's bonding capacity for other projects. I recall Councilor Lloyd recommending specifically a park project. And again, I go back to the 2021 referendum where there was a $2 million bond resolution at the same time as this particular project for Philly Park. So $2 million is a park, or going up to, I think the highest one we had was 14 some odd million. So the delta between the two could be 2 parks or 1 big park. So I would, want to be good neighbors to the rest of our other projects in town. And also putting on my co-interim finance director hat, obviously being the least expensive of all the costs. I think it conserves valuable resources in the terms of taxes to our residents, and demonstrates that we're a good shepherd of taxpayer funds. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Lois,
I agree with everything that Nancy said. We have an obligation as being members of this committee to try to do what is most economic for the town. But I think the other obligation is to try to get the bond referendum passed. And one way to demonstrate that we are being responsible is to say that although we are very anxious to complete the full project, we are doing it as economically as possible. And we need the bond issue to do the whole project. But we are doing it, we are choosing a path that will make that as economical as possible, even though it means that McMahon is delayed. So I think this is the best option, the most responsible for this committee, giving the very, very difficult position in which we've ended up.
thanks, Lois. More hands, more discussion? Going once. Patrick,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one quick thing that I didn't mention earlier, and that is to reiterate what Ava said earlier. Even though in this scenario, McMahon starts later, I think some of the things that our library staff has been doing will mitigate some of the concerns about starting McMahon a little bit. And actually, if we went back to the left side of the page, this is the original date that McMahon was going to start, I believe. But I just wanted to point out that Ava made very good examples of things that are being done to assist the patrons from McMahon Wintonberry Library. And I think all of those things, will help. And I think that's also part of this picture that we're trying to paint for a positive referendum outcome in November 23. So
Thank
I
you,
just
Mr.
wanted to add that. But again, if we could reconfirm, maybe Tom could just tell us if the McMahon start date originally was March of 24.
When we went out to bid, Patrick, or just over in option scenario 2A?
I think, but actually both in 2A and when we went out to bid. How much are we deviating from the original start date?
Well, both of them were supposed to start concurrently, and then McMahon finished 13 months into Prosser, so that we kind of lined up with that swing space, right? That's kind of how we got to the 14-month swing space. So the McMahon lined up with the swing space lease originally.
Okay.
Right. So Anthony, if you highlight the swing space right up to the 14 months with the dark line there, right? That's when we were anticipating turning over McMahon.
Okay.
Yes, we were plus or minus a month there with the swing space.
The other nice factor about how concurrent those bars are on this timeline is that if we do in fact move ahead with Prosser immediately, then we've got all our trades under contract, and then at that point we will be going out to bid again on McMahon. So the whole idea of trying to capture some savings from contractors who want to do 2 jobs in Bloomfield at the same time would be reopened under that scenario. So back to your question, Elizabeth, about are these prices going to be higher or lower? That tends to help us on the lower side, perhaps, with a series of contractors already working in Bloomfield that want to bid and capture another job at the same time. More hands. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that if we move forward with this motion, it would be great if we included language about the whole project in that, so that our public understood that we really are still talking about the entirety of what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yes, well, we can we can elaborate on this, in terms of what we specifically recommend to town council, beyond this. And I think that's a good idea, to do that. So right now, we have a motion to proceed with Prosser immediately, and pursue additional funding for the McMahon project. More hands. Going once. Mayor Wong. Thank you for joining us. You're muted.
Oh, there you go. Apologies. I'm working from my cell phone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I joined a little late and I know that there's a motion on the floor. Was the tax impact of the motion on the floor discussed? And if it isn't prepared, I would ask that staff put that in the package to the full council for determination and consideration. I think that's going to be a popular question amongst the body.
Yes, thank you for that. And yes, we were aware of that request from the Finance Committee meeting. And that will be in Monday's presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, we got a representative from the public that is raising their hand.
This is committee only at this point.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll take public comments later. Any other committee hands at this point on the motion? Okay, let's, Nancy, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Patrick,
Aye.
Lois,
Aye.
Liz Waterhouse,
I'm sorry, did you say my name?
yes, I did.
Yes, I.
Thank you. Bob Ike,
Aye.
Dr. Bryant, Mark Weissman.
Chair votes aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So it's probably appropriate to just talk a little bit about a November referendum schedule. Nancy, can you highlight that for us briefly? What will transpire, needs to transpire between now and then?
Sure. Anthony, you can stop sharing the screen, I think, for now. So the town's bond council has prepared a proposed schedule. And right now for the proposed schedule, Monday night would be the town council giving authorization to staff and bond council to prepare the bond resolutions. There's no dollar amount involved in that. It just has us start the process, or has the process started. Then it would be the first meeting in August of the town council, which would introduce the bond resolutions and set a public hearing date. And refer the project for an 8/24 hearing with planning and zoning. Planning and zoning meets on, I think it's the third or fourth Thursday in August. So, and planning and zoning does not have to get weigh in on the referral actually until after the referendum, but we tend to like to do it prior to the referendum. So we would be hopefully going before the TPZ. The project would go before them in August. And then at the second council meeting in August, the town council would hold a public hearing prior to the start of their meeting, and then they would vote on whether or not to actually place the bond referendums on the ballot for November. And then there's some procedural things that they would need, that the town clerk would need to do in order to print the ballots and There's explanatory text that our bond counsel does, but that doesn't involve really any, that's all kind of back office type of stuff. So it's most of the heavy lifting will be done in August. As far as the technicality goes, I mean, obviously there's a separate, I would envision a separate task force or maybe our outreach committee that would hopefully resurrect themselves to revisit what they did in 2021, but that is not on the schedule for us at this point. We were just trying to do what we needed to do to make the November 7th ballot.
Okay, so I think it would be in order for us to have a motion a little more specific on our recommendation to town council with regards to the action that we would like them to take on Monday night. Which would be that we recommend town council approves a resolution directing town officers to authorize additional appropriation for the library projects approved in 2021 and to prepare the necessary resolution. So that would allow things to get in motion for future action by the council at that point. And I suppose we should put our dollar amount in there at this point, what we'd be recommending for that. Although, if I'm correct, Nancy, the council would not have to commit to that dollar amount until the actual approval of the resolution at their later meeting in August. Is that correct?
Yes, if we do it based the way we did it last time in 2021, the initial resolution authorizing town staff and officers to prepare the paperwork did not include a dollar amount. That came with the bonding resolutions that were prepared by the bond council. Obviously, if the town council would be so inclined to provide us with some guidance and what they would want to see, that would be great, but it's not anticipated at this point that the resolution authorizing us to proceed is, it does not need to have the dollar amount in it.
Okay, well, we'll certainly inform the council of where we're at with what we see as necessary additional funding. And then at the appropriate time, the council, if they move forward, would approve theoretically that amount. So I'm going to repeat what I said here because we don't have it in front of us. Would somebody like to make a motion that we recommend to town council that they approve a resolution directing town officers to authorize additional appropriation for the library projects approved in 2021 and to prepare the necessary resolution?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Ike, seconded by
I'll second.
Patrick. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on that? Nancy, would you do a roll call vote for us, please?
Sure. Patrick,
Aye.
Lois,
Aye.
Liz,
Aye.
Bob Ike,
Aye.
Dr. Bryant. I'm sorry? I didn't hear that. Did anyone, could you repeat that, Dr. Bryant? Did anyone with better hearing catch that?
No, I did not.
Not.
I haven't been able to hear any of her responses.
Okay, Mark,
Aye.
all right, so it passes anyway.
Okay, hopefully we can fix that
Yeah.
problem. Okay, and another little fact about it, if these monies are approved at a referendum, it does not prohibit us from seeking other funding sources that just sets the maximum limit that the town would be able to borrow under that bonding. So we still have that option as we move forward. Okay. Anything else from Downs?
No, Mark, thank you very much.
Good.
Yep.
All right. Any other comments on that? If not, let's move to, Nancy, you have an invoice for us tonight?
I do. I have one invoice, and that would be to Colliers, invoice number 862222 in the amount of $11,280.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ike, seconded by Patrick. Thank
Patrick.
you very much. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you. That's our one and only invoice, Nancy.
Yes,
Okay, next meetings will be July 26th and August 9th. Depending on action or whatever transpires at the town council meeting on the 24th, we may or may not need our meeting on the 26th. So we'll be informing everybody about that. We may be in a holding pattern or not. So let's see what happens. But otherwise, we'll be meeting in 1 week, less than 1 week. All right. Further comments from the committee? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, everybody. And Nancy, there are hands up from the public.
yes. First one we have is Counselor Curtin. Go ahead.
Yep, good evening, everyone. Okay, I have, I think earlier in the conversation, I think Maxine brought up a very valid question in regards to various scenarios or, in a sense, some of the factors in making the decision. And one of the factors that I think is important, and I don't think it was discussed tonight, is when it comes to both of the buildings, what is the usage? Is that information public? Is that information going to be available for Monday night? Because I think it's a valid one. That should be part of that discussion. Another discussion point that I believe is important that should have took place tonight is, if we do go out for referendum, would there be a caveat to the referendum question on where do the town believe the main brand should be? I think that's a valid question, because I think what we have to realize, when voters voted back in 2021 on the libraries within the town, I think they were under the impression, I don't think any one of us can quantify who voted for what. I think everyone came out with what was presented and voted for a project that includes both libraries. So I think to have the assumption that somehow the residents that came out and voted in 2021 would, number one, come out and vote for additional referendum, and not knowing that the library that they might have voted for because they needed to be improved for whatever reason is not part of the discussion. So I think these are comments that I believe this building committee needed to have tonight before coming to council on Monday. And I'm disappointed that that didn't take place, because I think it's important. So what I would just request is some of the points that I raised tonight be discussed, whether I number one, would like to know exactly the usage between the two libraries within the town. And that, to me, number one, should be the motivation, is making sure that usage gets first preference. I understand the factor in the costs, and that's a whole different story. But when you factor in the cost and whether or not the community would support that, I think part of the discussion needs to have, number one, should we have one library in the town? Can we afford it? None of that, I believe, was discussed, but I look forward to having more discussion on Monday. But I would have liked to see some of those points be discussed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Curtin. We have another hand, more hands.
Yes. Budunzi Graham Days.
Hello, thank you. As a former member of this library building committee, I can't express to you how disturbed I am as to where you are right now. Okay, because at the time, and for you new members, I hope you go back and look at videos. I hope that you've been provided binders that are complete as to this process. But what I have a hard time with this, with regards to what we did in 2020, starting this committee, had already been done in 2016. Not the chair at the time and not the current chair, who was the chair of the previous 2016 Library Building Committee, thought that it was necessary to build off of that. Nor did the current library director think that it was necessary to build off of a vision of a previous longstanding library director and library staff. Money had been spent previously from the beginning. Okay, I need to have an understanding as to how your overage got this far without any checks and balances. Okay, I have concerns with you, Nancy, as the risk manager or the director of risk and procurement for the town, and you're working as the interim financial director. To me, that's a conflict of interest. And this whole project is a problem before ground has even been broken, before buildings have even been torn down. And so the town just passed $100 million budget plus this year. And you have the audacity to want to put this project on the referendum due to your lack of due diligence, due to your lack of concern for the taxpayers of Bloomfield, because some of you members on this committee from the beginning, whole thing was money is cheap right now. The interest rate is cheap, despite paying attention to how the economy was shifting. But you didn't want to hear that. So now you find yourself in this position and you want to ask for more. And may I please note before I go, this project was originally approved by the council for $25 million. By the time it got to referendum, it was $30 million. And now you want 10 million more? Let that sink in. How about that? And how about you tell the people what it really is versus your recommendations? Because as far as I see, your recommendations have no weight and hold no value. Because before it even got started, we possibly will not get a return on investment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kevin Goff.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Kevin Goff, 5 Bear Ridge Drive. I'll be very brief. Thank you for a good presentation. I think I came to the building committee meeting, I guess, a week ago. I think most of the questions have been answered. The one other thing, and with the understanding, I think that looking at some of the tax, obviously the tax impact of the referendum amount, that came up at the finance subcommittee meeting on Monday, but and will be answered Monday. But I think the one other thing that I was mentioned last time that a couple of people mentioned, and I also brought up, in terms of the potential cost-cutting ideas, the bridge across Wash Brook, again, that started off with the 2015-16 design straight into the back entrance. Now it's been changed, and I would hope that will be presented with what the reduced cost would be with eliminating that and just using the sidewalk on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public would like to speak? You can raise your virtual hand. Don't be shy.
Going once. Going twice. All right, thank you, everybody, for attending. Appreciate all the comments. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Ike, seconded by,
Seconded.
second by
Liz.
Liz Waterhouse. Thank you very much. All in favor of adjourning, raise your hands. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.